Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us for another insightful episode of TT Online Community Voices, where we bring the voices to you in the community. We know we had to do this differently this time because of the pandemic, and we are still going to give you that information straight to your doorstep, right there in your homes. We are here with you. My name is Roma, and thank you for having me as your host today. As we dive into our topic today, we are talking about mental health. And I have with me a panel of experts in this field of mental health. So I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Hazel Othello, who is a psychiatrist. I have it right? Dr.
That's
Othello,
correct. That's correct.
And then I have a psychologist to my right. I have Ms. Deborah Lee Revere. I pronounced that right, Deborah?
You got it
All
first
right,
time.
great. So first of all, I know that there are some people who are asking, what is a psychologist and what is a psychiatrist? So let me start with you, Doc. What is a psychiatrist?
Okay, so a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. So I've gone to medical school and did the whole bit of that, graduated as a doctor. And then all doctors specialize in something. So some people do medicine, surgery, obstetrics, and deal with the babies and the pregnant mothers or whatever. I specialized in psychiatry, which is really the aspect of healthcare that deals with mental health. We deal with the brain and brain functioning and treat brain disorders.
Mm-hmm. And the psychologist side of things, Deborah?
As opposed to the psychologist looks at the behavioral aspect, the emotional aspects of mental health. You know, they do evaluations, assessments,
Right.
Whether for children, adults, that sort of thing.
Okay, so today we're talking mental health. And I know that this topic is pretty new within the past decade for me, because I knew that when I was growing up, and I'm sure you at home would have heard it, we would always hear, that is a madman, that is mad people thing. And it wasn't an issue of mental health, it was a cultural saying of, that's madness, or is a mad person.
That's right.
And now, within the past decade, I've been hearing a lot more about mental health. And not only in the past decade, but more recently, within the past year and a half, with COVID-19. We've been hearing a lot of people suffering from mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. So, Doc, let me start with you in terms of COVID-19 hit us. We didn't expect this. How do you think this has affected the mental health of some citizens of Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, I think if you look at the broadest definition of mental health, which speaks to the ability to feel well, to function well, to basically be your best, not just the absence of a mental illness per se, but feeling well emotionally and being able to just contribute to society at the level that you would like to. When you look at it from that perspective, pretty much all of us have been affected in some way by this pandemic when it comes to our mental health. We've been annoyed at things that have happened. We've been stressed out. But, you know, for some people, it has been more difficult than for others. So for some persons, it's caused them quite a bit of anxiety. For some persons, it's caused them to become really sad because of, you know, things like losing loved ones, or relatives who have become very ill and have required hospitalization, and the stress that that has put on families. In addition, because of all the social fallout of the pandemic, the inability to work for some persons for lengthy periods, and therefore the inability to earn and difficulty supporting families. Many things like that have put additional stress on individuals and on families. And as a result of that, it has been a difficult time for lots of persons.
So how would you advise someone who is having a difficult time mentally coping with the pandemic and what is happening around them to deal with it?
Well, that depends on the severity of what's happening with you. For most persons, just finding someone to talk to can be very, very helpful. Someone who listens, someone who understands, someone who is supportive towards you. You know, who can help point you in the right direction if you need a bit of advice and things like that. Help you find a structured way out of what is causing you difficulty. But for some people, it becomes more difficult than that. And they may need some level of mental health support, either speaking with a counselor or getting more in-depth therapy if that is required. In a small number of cases, the anxiety or the depression has escalated to the point where it becomes a disease process, and you know, treatment with medication in those cases may become necessary. But even in those cases, the combination of medication and talking to a trained professional, a psychologist, a social worker, some kind of mental health therapist is usually the best approach.
So Doc mentioned, Deborah, about someone going through that sort of experience and they may need the assistance of a psychologist. Now, I know people who they kind of getting fed up of being bombarded with the news all the time of every day is something with COVID. Every day is something new with COVID. It's COVID this, it's COVID that. Is vaccines talk? Is it whether it's mandatory? Is not? Is to vaccinate the kids? Is something with COVID and the pandemic every single day from since last year, March, till now. And it has been weighing heavy on them. And what would you advise from a psychologist standpoint as to how to deal with this?
Okay, now we have to remember there's a lot of information, as you said, coming into us. How do we treat with this information? We must first recognize, is it credible information or is it not credible? So we don't want to believe everything that we see or hear. We need also to know that we may have our support system, similar to what Dr. Othello said. You may have your friends. You may have persons who are counselors, social workers in the community who can, listen to you when you have an issue. Even from your workplace, the workplace may have some type of mental health type, counseling or Zoom sessions, as a lot of places have been doing now. And most importantly, for the children have been hit extremely hard by this separation from their friends and from their schools and from their enjoyment. So how do we treat with our children? What do we do for them? What do we do? We have to do things that will, still make them feel as though they're living and they're part of life. So you have your games, you have contact, you maintain contact with persons, whether by video chat, whether by phone, and you try to normalize a situation that is not normal as much as possible. And most importantly, you must communicate. You have to be able to tell someone how you feel. You said earlier, the big term psychologist and psychiatrist, and yes, people do mix them up. But if you just want to talk to someone, if you just want to share, you just want to vent, how you're feeling about something, how something is affecting you, how your thoughts are racing, how this situation is causing a bit of anxiety or a bit of worry. You need to be able to communicate with that. So then you should have a resource list of persons. And resource doesn't mean a big word, but a simple list of persons of who should I contact if I need to talk to someone. Is it 800 numbers, or as I said, is it places from your workplace? Is it friends who can speak to you and listen to you?
So would you think, Deborah, that it makes the process easy mentally to deal with these stresses by speaking about it to someone, whether it is a psychologist or a family member? Because I know some people try to internalize what is taking place with themselves and they bottle up all of their feelings and their emotions.
Yes.
Would you recommend that they speak out?
I would recommend, of course. I'm into talk therapy, so I would recommend it. But we come from a culture where sometimes speaking out is kind of stigmatized. Is something wrong with me? Why do I have to talk to someone? Why can't I deal with this on my own? So it needs to really be put across in such a way that this person is there to listen, this person is objective, you can bounce ideas off this person, you can vent with this person, whatever terms that you need to use to encourage that person why it is so important to talk about, whether it's how they are feeling, their relationships. Remember, within the pandemic, relationships created people are home more.
Right.
So if persons are home more, you know what can happen. Good things can happen and not so good things.
Because I now come into that too, in terms of relationships. And Doc, you would be able to speak on this as well, is that no one would have predicted this.
That's right.
As much as you love the wifey or you love the husband, sometimes it can become a lot.
It is. And in addition to that, there is a great issue of intimate partner violence. So if that is a case that's going on in this home, and this person is now home more, not able to go out, there's a curfew, stops are closed, tempers could flare, persons become a little more irritable, they're not working, less money coming in, the children are there, they need tablets, they need devices. So you see all the things that add up that can create a not so positive dynamic.
Yeah, and then too, you're spending a lot more time with this person than you would accustomed spending. Because, yes, you would have a wife or you would have a husband or a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they may be living with you. But you know, they would normally pick up themselves 7 o'clock in the morning, get ready and bust it and go to work for the day. And you don't see them till in the evening. And then you may spend a little bit of time with them, or even the children. They head across the school, and then you pick them up in the afternoon. But now, you have to spend whole day, every
24.
day with these people. And they're in your space. So what would you recommend for, let's say, a family who is not accustomed dealing with being around those people for such a long period of extended time?
What a lot of people have found helpful is making sure that they still have structure in their lives during those times when they're all at home together. In other words, yes, we're all at home together, but there are periods during which the children have to do some schoolwork, and this extended even before online classes started back. You know, spend some time sitting and reading a book or doing something. Similarly, for adults, they have to engage in activities that they find interesting and, you know, things that get their attention and keep them involved so that they're not just sitting there wondering. None of us like sitting wondering what to do with ourselves. We have to have a plan, we have to have a strategy. So structuring your time has been particularly helpful in reducing that sense of just sitting staring at the same person in the same space all day. What has been more challenging has been the families where there was already tension in the family before a lockdown, so that people were having difficulty communicating or getting along. And in some cases were escaping from that by going to school or to work or wherever.
Right.
So that escape is no longer there and you have to face that which you were avoiding. And in those situations, what we have recommended are the helplines, because if you can't go to an office to see somebody, the helplines become particularly important. And one of the things that the Ministry of Health did was, in collaboration with PAHO, that's the Pan American Health Organization, we set up a mental health and psychosocial support network. And as a result of that, we were able to create a directory of services. And the Association of Psychologists is one of our
That's right.
valued, one of our valued members of that group. So that, because what happened at the beginning was we noticed that different people were setting up helplines, but there was no coordination. So that it was difficult for people to know who to call for what.
Right.
So we were able to put that together so that if you go on your computer or on your phone or any device that has internet now, and you simply look up findcareTT.com, you get directed to a repository or a list of services for different kinds of disorders. So for instance, there are resources there for domestic violence, there are resources for children, there are resources for adults, there are resources for people who are having suicidal thoughts. So whatever is the challenge you're facing, you can find some support through that helpline.
So Doc, as well, you mentioned earlier the term anxiety. And I've been hearing this more and more frequently now in terms of anxiety. Could you tell us exactly what is anxiety?
Okay. Anxiety is that feeling of unease when things aren't going quite right that all of us have experienced at different stages in our lives. For instance, you're called to give a speech and you have to stand in front of a crowd and you've never done that before, and you stand up and your heart starts racing and your knees start shaking and your stomach starts to feel funny and you're wondering what's going on here, boy, I have to face this crowd. Am I going to collapse? Am I going to faint?
They call it butterflies or something.
Right, that's right. We call it butterflies.
Right.
Or just before an exam. You know,
Right.
at any point like that, we feel that feeling. Right? And the body has a system in place for dealing with that. So we usually get out of that feeling pretty soon. But what happens sometimes is that, you know, for instance, if a dog was chasing you, your body has a mechanism to prepare you to either run from that dog, or if you're so inclined, attack the dog and, you know, beat it up
Fight
or
or
whatever.
flight.
Fight or flight, as we call it. So that anxiety response is really the body's way of preparing for fight or flight responses. However, sometimes when this stressful event is going on and on and on, or it's particularly intense, the body just stays in that mode even after the stressful event is gone. So the heart continues to race. The stomach continues to churn out acids that, have an uncomfortable effect on how you feel. You're still breathing fast. You're still having all these bodily senses, the bodily feelings that you would feel in an acute, severe situation, even when there is no situation. And that's why it's so uncomfortable, because there's nothing triggering it at the time, but you can't stop the feeling.
So anxiety is not only a mental issue, because you're speaking about physical things that actually happens to the body that the person can feel.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
So what are just reiterate some of the symptoms that someone will know who never experienced, because I have never known that I would have gone through anxiety until I'm hearing you saying things like your heartbeat racing. So what other things we can look out for to know that this is anxiety?
Okay, first I must clarify that a certain level of anxiety is totally normal, and we all experience it, and it's part of life, and we deal with it and we move on.
Right.
So that's not a disease process. But when it's particularly intense and particularly severe, that's when a physiological process has kicked in that may sometimes require even medical intervention. And that's when the heart is racing, the rate of breathing is particularly fast. People feel body pains, in the stomach, headaches, other physical
all of this from
pains can happen.
anxiety. You
Yes.
thinking about
Muscles tense up.
COVID or an issue
Yeah.
in your life or an exam or something like that, and this will create these physical. All right.
So the tense muscles produce pain and a number of other physical symptoms, and it could be quite debilitating. It could actually be so severe that people sometimes feel as though they're going to have a heart attack or as though they're going to die, and that's when we call it a panic attack. Those are the really severe, intense episodes.
So a panic
of
attack is
anxiety.
linked to anxiety.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a severe, sudden, intense bout of anxiety.
So if someone is going through a severe bout of anxiety or a panic attack, what would you recommend? And let me ask Deborah in this case. Someone is going through this. What can they do to calm their body in this anxiety attack or this bout or this panic attack?
Well, first of all, you'll have to explain to them. You may not be able to do it then, according to how severe it is. But if it is that it's just anxiety and it doesn't actually lead to the panic right at that time, you'll have to explain to them in simple terms what is happening to their body, similar to what Dr. Otello said. So they are able to recognize it when it comes on. When they recognize it, now they need to know now what to do. I know what it is. I need to be, I'm sitting, I'm grounded, nothing is going to happen to me. This is going to pass. I need to be able to breathe better. Sometimes you may know that you need to get enough air, because sometimes you feel, you're sweating profusely and you feel as if you're going to pass out.
You see that and I take a deep breath one time,
No, well, I'm sure you have felt it before.
I didn't know
You
it was
feel
anxiety.
you're
I would
sweating
have
and
felt it, right.
you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? But you need to just be grounded. You sit, okay, I know where I am. So you kind of locate yourself. I'm here, I'm safe. Nothing is happening to me, but this is so, I'm going to just take some deep breaths. You could do the 5, the 7 deep breaths, hold it, let it out. But it's something that you have to practice continuously for it to work. But the person must understand what it is prior to doing that.
So the deep breathing helps.
It helps a lot. The deep breathing, getting into a very quiet space, just thinking certain thoughts. What do they like? Where do they like to be? Some people like to be at the beach. Some people like to be at the movies. Some people like to hear certain types of music. So they have to be able to think these things. So it's something you have to teach them how to do it.
Right, because I remember I was just in a calm state. It wasn't I was in a panic state or anything like that. And my heart started to race. And my girlfriend, I was telling my girlfriend at the time, I think something happening. My heart started to race. And she thought it was love. But I say, well, I don't think love this
It was
is
not. It could have been an intense love.
But then she was explaining that it could have been like anxiety. But I was saying, but I wasn't anxious at the moment. And then I heard you saying that sometimes it may be an event that happened before and then you feel the physical effects of it after. And yes, I did that. Exactly what Deborah was saying, the deep breathing, and it helped with that. So Dr. Otello, let me ask, can anxiety lead to depression?
Well, anxiety and depression can coexist. right? They're both what we call mood disorders, and because the same system of brain cells is involved, the same brain chemistry is involved, people can have symptoms of depression and symptoms of anxiety at the same time, or they can have one by itself.
So, and let's break down depression, because I will give another story where I would have a friend of mine, and he said that every time he got home, his girlfriend would be in a sad, melancholy mood. And he would always ask her, what is wrong? And he would say, but you have nothing to be sad about. But she was always in this sad state. And she was explaining to him that she thought she was going through depression. But he, as a person, never experienced depression before. So he couldn't understand it. So could we break down exactly what is depression and what are some of the symptoms or signs of someone that is going through depression that we could look out for?
Okay, we all know that we feel sad sometimes, and that is usually time limited. Something happens, we respond to it because it's a sad thing. We feel that emotion, and over a relatively short period of time, we're back to normal. The illness that we call depression is something much more intense than that. This person is depressed, is feeling sad all the time. It's not something they can control. It's not a function of what's happening around them or happening to them at the time. So like your friend said, you know, nothing bad was happening in the home at the time, but his girlfriend was feeling that way. So what we describe it as an enduring or persistent sad mood. And that can be going on for as long as 2 weeks or longer. All the time, or at most of the day, most days. And it comes with a number of other symptoms, such as sleep disorders. So for instance, some people have difficulty sleeping, others sleep all the time. They just sleep in a sense to escape that feeling. They just sleep. And then you have changes in appetite. So some people just lose their appetite or it's significantly reduced. Other people eat much more than they normally would. So they're eating excessively and gaining weight, as opposed to the ones who are not eating and maybe losing weight. And then you have difficulties with concentration, difficulties with changes in your energy level. So you're tired all the time, even without physically doing something that would make you feel tired. And in more severe situations, people may start to have thoughts of hopelessness. Life is no longer worth living. Why am I here? Should I just pack it up? Should I end, should I die? Should I actually end my life? That's the worst case scenario where people actually start to think about ending their lives. So depression has a wide range of symptoms. They may not all exist in the same person, but when you have that combination of symptoms, including a general loss of interest, people lose interest in the things they normally would like to do. So students lose interest in their classroom activities. A wife may lose interest in her household, the taking care of the family and the housework that she would normally do quite comfortably. So, or even hobbies and careers and things that people, are normally quite interested in or even passionate about. They just lose the interest and that zeal and that zest for life.
So Deborah, we're dealing with depression, and someone is going through this, or they may have a family member that is going through this. And we, as I said, trainees, we kind of trivialize a lot of stuff. So you have a family member and you find it sad all the time, and you say, boy, what happened to you, boy? Why you moping around your house? So come on, get up and do whatever you're supposed to do.
Snap out of it.
Snap out of it. You have food on the table, you have a roof over your head, you have nothing to be sad about. Yes. And this person is going through depression. And let's say it's a child. And they don't know how to express themselves. They don't know what to do. What advice would you have for someone who's looking at us right now who may be going through depression? Or you may have a family member that is going through depression. What would you advise?
Okay. Before I give my advice, I want to say that we tend to use the word depression a bit loosely in Trinidad sometimes because everybody's depressed. So they tend to think, well, I'm going through depression, but it may just be sadness. I'm just sad, I lost my job, but you're not depressed. Okay? So there's a big difference.
There's a difference between sadness and depression.
Of course. If it is that the person is going through this, as you're saying, you will need to get some assistance for the person. But before you get that assistance, or you may not be able to get that assistance immediately, you can have a conversation with the person. Just talk with them. What's going on? Tell me what's going on. Don't try to pressure them. Don't try to judge them. Don't try to bully them. As you said, don't tell them you shouldn't feel this way. Tell me how you're feeling. When did you start feeling like this? You know, what do you do then? Do you do anything? And they may tell you what they do, what they don't want to do. So then you get a clear idea that this may be sounding a little more serious. You know, you don't have to be a psychologist to figure that out. Or they might say, I've been feeling like this 2 weeks, every day. Because you'll say, I really didn't see you come out of bed and you didn't bathe. Because sometimes people don't want to bathe. They don't want to do anything. So you, as the friend or the family member, you can have that conversation with the person. And in doing that, then you can try to get assistance for them. Because remember, in that state, a person may not be moved to get assistance for themselves. They're just like lethargic. So you now may have to, as Dr. Otello said, there are a lot of resources right now where people can call. TTAP also has a hotline. And they can give information. If they can't do it, they'll refer you to who you can call, where you can get assistance. And many times this assistance is free. You know, it can be free. And then you can move on from there. So the first thing is you have to be able to listen. Be an attentive listener. So attentive listening means just listening.
Just listening.
No interrupting.
What is happening, and you just listen.
No judgment, no guiding what they're saying. Just listening.
All right. And you're saying that there's a difference. What stood out is that there's a difference between the sadness and the depression. And something that stood out to me when what Dr. Otello was saying as well is that it's a sadness for a prolonged period of time too.
Yes.
So
pervasive, 2 weeks and more.
2 weeks or more.
And you know, continuous hopelessness, sadness, and then same thing as Dr. Otello said, it may also affect other parts of your body. You know, you start to get pains. And you didn't do anything to get any pain, per se.
So your mind is controlling what is happening to your body.
Because it's physiological as well. And you know, you just don't want to do, you just can't put, have you ever felt where you just can't get up? You can't put one foot in front of the other, or to do it is like so painful?
Well, personally, I have never experienced depression. So that's why I'm always so very interested in mental health issues and depression, especially because I always hear people who said that they went through depression. But to me, I am the happiest man alive. So I always happy-go-lucky. So it's very difficult for me to understand depression, and that's why I'm very, very curious about it and what takes place. And that leads me to ask Dr. Otello, is it a chemical thing that happens in the mind, and could it be treated with medication?
The brain is an amazing organ, and I always remind my patients that the brain is an organ of the body, just like the heart and the liver and the lung and the kidneys and any other organ you may want to mention. Therefore, it can get sick. Right? Every organ can get sick, and the brain is no different. Everything that we do involves brain processes. Everything that we do consciously or even unconsciously involves the brain circuits, cells sending messages to each other, telling the other muscles of the body, the hands, the feet, whatever, what to do. And even telling the stomach to digest and the lungs to breathe and things like that. And similarly, there are specific areas of the brain that manage mood. And when the brain cells in those areas aren't functioning properly because they don't have the correct chemical environment, we experience these symptoms. And that is why medication has been developed for treating depressive illnesses. And I will clarify that not every depressed person needs medication. During mild episodes of depression or even sometimes moderate intensity of symptoms, psychotherapy, or what we call talk therapy, can be adequate, and many persons do not need medication. But if the illness has progressed to a certain extent, and most mental health professionals, whether they're doctors or not, can tell you, I think you need to see a doctor for this one, right? So sometimes a psychologist or a social worker would work with you, and they would know, yeah, this person is going to be all right with some talk therapy. But when they pick up a certain severity of symptom patterns, they tend to refer to doctors who can place that person on an antidepressant medication. And antidepressants are very, very effective. And in the vast majority of cases, they're well tolerated.
And Dr. Otello mentioned some people going into a state of depression, and then sometimes it may lead to suicidal thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
So we have someone in the household, and they may be even bringing it up that mommy or daddy are feeling to kill myself, you know, or
Yeah.
are feeling to do something to harm myself. And then sometimes when I was growing up too, I saw some students, they started cutting themselves. So I'm not sure if any parents have seen this trend in the household where some of the children were doing this
The cutting.
cutting thing. And I never understood what is what triggers that reaction of someone harming
Cutting.
themselves. Yes.
Okay. Well, self-harm, of which cutting is one of them, most of the times it's because the person is going through some type of anxiety, some type of trauma. Something has occurred, and this is how they are dealing with it. Most of the time, that persons will cut themselves. It's not that they may actually want to kill themselves. I have found.
Right.
It's simply because something occurred in their lives many times, because this happens a lot with teens. It's some type of abuse. The trauma is some type of abuse, whether it be sexual or physical or emotional type abuse within the family. And they deal with it by cutting themselves. Because in cutting themselves, it gives them a sense of balance, a sense of calm. It just kind of levels them out a bit, that whole anxiety that's going through with them. Yeah?
So someone who is in a state of harming themselves, whether it be suicidal or cutting, and you seeing this happening to them, and they may not want to go out there and seek help, what do you do as a family member? Because I have heard this personally where somebody's saying, yeah, you want to kill yourself, let you go ahead and kill yourself, man.
Yes.
And I say, but how you could say that?
Yeah.
And their response was, if they really wanted to kill themselves, they would have killed themselves a long time ago.
Yeah.
What would you advise someone in
Now,
that situation?
suicidal behavior is a different thing to cutting. If someone is saying, they're saying it to you, you know, I want to kill myself. I can't take this anymore. I don't want to live. They may say that constantly for some time. You may want to get an idea, do they have a plan? Because then it takes it a step further. Because sometimes things happen, a person breaks up they go through a bad relationship. They say, oh my God, I feel like I can die. But it may not be that they really want to kill themselves. So you need to get that information out of the person. If the family member, once again, we're talking about communication, as I said before, you need to be able to ask certain questions, simple questions. If you can't ask those questions, because they have some persons they really can't, they are impatient, especially if it's their loved ones, and they just don't, they will be like, why are you talking stupidness? You know, you have food, you have clothes, why? So they will not be able to do it, so then you may need to seek outside assistance. If it's a teenager, they may have assistance from within the schools, they may have assistance through the RHAs, they may have assistance privately. You know, you get someone where this person is able to talk to someone if you think you are not able to get from them why they do it. Because many times you may be part of the situation too. You know?
Right. So you might have to take yourself out of it because you may be the one oppressing them in the
In their
household
mind.
and
So
in
they
their
may not, they
mind.
wouldn't want to tell you that because
Yeah.
it could get worse before it gets
So
better.
you might need a neutral party to get involved, and that's where you all will come in.
So
to be
the
able
thing
to
about
give
the key
advice.
is listening. We must be able to listen in our homes. Parents, you know, listen, the adults to their children, and really listen to hear what they're saying.
All right. And in terms of PTSD, I heard this term recently as well. Post-traumatic, is it stress disorder?
That's correct.
Right. And as we are in this pandemic, and I know a couple of people who would have lost a loved one, and on top of that loved one being gone, and then the stresses of COVID-19, I'm hearing more and more people being diagnosed with PTSD. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Okay, sometimes we use these terms rather loosely. Sometimes, you know, we've heard it somewhere and we experience a few symptoms and we say, yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
So we have to be careful about throwing labels
That's
around.
right.
But post-traumatic stress disorder is actually a syndrome of symptoms that people experience after intensely traumatic events. Usually things outside of your normal day-to-day experience. For instance, somebody was attacked at gunpoint or was in a plane crash or raped or, you know, something really, Or even we've seen it sometimes after motor vehicle accidents, severe accidents.
Right.
So you were in a very traumatic incident, and subsequent to that, you start to experience those same anxiety symptoms that I mentioned before, together with increased arousal. So you're startled easily, you're jumping without much, without anything really happening. And, you're feeling very on edge all the time. And the symptoms can become so severe that you start to avoid anything that reminds you of that event or that makes you feel as though you are reliving that event. Because some of the things that happen in this disorder are nightmares and, flashbacks of the event. So you constantly feel as though you're reliving the thing that brought you here, the trauma. So you're awake and you're feeling as though it's still happening, or you're asleep, but you're having nightmares. So it can be, we've seen it, for instance, psychiatrists have seen it in war veterans because of the kind of trauma they faced on the battlefield. So it's a very severe, it's not something that should be treated lightly. And again, it has to be diagnosed by a mental health professional. It shouldn't just be
somebody who watches and say, that is PTSD.
That's something like PTSD,
man.
no. If you think that's what's happening with you, see a mental health professional so that you can be properly diagnosed and appropriately treated.
Okay. So we're dealing with all of the different issues in terms of mental health. And is there some advice, some steps that people could take to take care of their mental health so that they don't end up in a situation where they are in a mental health issue, or they go through depression, or they go through anxiety? Are there daily practices or lifestyle routines that someone could start to adopt from early on to as I say, prevention is better than cure?
Preventative,
preventative measures.
Yes, there could be. You have to recognize first your body and yourself. Just as how we have mental health, we have physical health. And if it is that we get a pain or something is wrong with us, a toothache, what do? Well, most of the time, we would seek assistance for it. So in the same way, if your emotional health, dealing with certain things affecting you, you find you're not able to concentrate sometimes when you think you should be able to, maybe I should see someone, I should speak to someone. If it is I can't see that, you have to recognize what's going on with yourself. Why am I feeling like this? Now, a lot of people go on to look at our self-help type literature.
Right.
The internet is it. So people will read up. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it may not be. But for those who it's useful, so they might come to terms with, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm feeling. You might want to talk to someone about it, your friend, a colleague, a co-worker. So they might say, well, okay, I've seen certain things. No, I didn't see that. No, you really think that? That type of bouncing ideas off of one another. Because remember, we all go through things that get us sad at times. We're not always happy. Sometimes we get angry, anxious, etc., etc. But how are we able to come out of it? Or do we just take it on and then it becomes an issue where we can't deal with it? So that is because we are not always happy. We're not always sad.
True.
We are not always, sometimes we are afraid, we are fearful. But am I in a constant state of fear?
So Dr. Otello, would you think, I remember we were having this discussion where we were tying what happens mentally to what happens physically. So you were saying with the anxiety that someone will experience mentally, whether it's before you go to an audience or before you speak to someone who you never spoke to before, whatever the case may be, will give you that anxiety mentally would result in physical changes in your body, meaning your heart palpitations and all of that. Could the reverse happen, where if I change my breathing or my meditation or exercising or the things that I would do, could those things help to strengthen my mental capacity where I would not end up in a situation like that?
Absolutely. There are physical things that we can do to help us to be healthier mentally. So that as mental health practitioners, we always talk about self-care, right? And self-care starts at the most basic level with things like diet and exercise and sleep. Sleep is very, very important, particularly young people who are studying for exams. I remember when I was at UWI on campus, we used to say sleep is a concept. Of course, we said it jokingly because deep down inside, we know we needed sleep, but we were so behind on our catching up and getting ready for exams that we tried to trivialize the need for sleep. But sleep is important. So staying up all night because you think you will do better on an exam the next day is the absolute worst
thing
you can do, right? Because then you're sleepy in the exam, you can't concentrate, you're too tired, and then you become anxious, and then you start to panic. And in some cases, children never finished those exams. So that sleep is important, appetite is important, diet is important. So you try to eat a healthy diet, including your vegetables and things like that, not just the fast food and the snacks, right? And exercise, please, exercise is important. Exercise helps with sleep, exercise helps with concentration. Exercise just helps to balance. And I can say from personal experience, exercise, when things are intensely stressful, I drop everything and I go for a run, a walk. I stay out there for an hour to an hour and a half with my favorite music in my earphones, and I come back home a different person.
Right, and it helps with your mental.
Absolutely.
It definitely helps.
So yes,
we
what
have
we
sleep,
do physically
we
is
have
important.
eating healthy, we have exercise.
Absolutely.
What about meditation or yoga practices?
Those things have been found to be helpful. In fact, there's a whole realm of mental health called mindfulness, where it focuses on that relationship between the body and the mind and that sort of thing. So yes, it's very important. It helps, and lots of people benefit from it.
Okay. So basically, we have some things that we can do to make ourselves feel better physically and will relate mentally. And then we know that in this pandemic as well, because a lot of people are working from home, there is sometimes a difficulty to separate home life from work life. So they get up in the morning, they would have their cup of coffee, they would have their breakfast, and then they start working one time. But then they sometimes work straight down to the end of the night, and then they get up in the morning and they do it again, and that becomes their routine, and now work becomes their life. How important would you say, Deborah, is taking scheduled breaks from your work life now?
It's critical. It's critical, particularly because, remember, you're working from home. So you need to have a schedule, a timetable. What time I'm working from to what time. You take your break. You move away from the desk or wherever you're using at your home. That time you can have something to eat. You can wet your plants. You can, do something that, listen to some music in your break time. When you're finished with your work, you move away from that area, wherever your desk is set up. If you can close the door, well, better. But if you can't, you move away from it and you don't go back to it. Because you need now to be, okay, this is my home time. What do I do when I'm home? Am I going to do some plants, some gardening? Am I going to just play with the dog or, read? So it's very important to separate in order to have your health, your emotional and your mental health in a good place.
Yeah, because I think now more than ever, we have to make sure that our mental health is intact. Because work can take over. As I said, we bombarded with all this COVID news all the time, and it could definitely affect us. And I love what you said with the exercise too, Doc, is that for me, that is my escape, because I can be a workaholic at times. And sometimes I just had to schedule it and say, here now, 5 o'clock reach.
That's it, put down everything.
Yes, I drop in it. So I go in and do some push-ups, or I go and do something, and then I have to leave it. And a lot of the time too, we think that we need to get everything done in one day. And what I found is helpful for me is that I like to plan my week on a Sunday. So I would plan all the week, and I would list all my tasks on a list, and I would schedule, okay, Monday is this, Tuesday is that, so that we don't put everything on one day, and then you don't get it done, and then now you're getting anxious.
That's
so you
right.
separate things.
And what I forgot to say as well is that when you have finished work, you move away from the laptop or the computer if your work is on the laptop. You don't want to go back on it now when you're searching for COVID-related news, or because it still keeps you in a place of
stress.
That's right. So you move away from that. And you also, there's a time when you can stop messaging or stop reading your messages from your phone. There's a time to be like, okay, it's hard. It's very hard for most people, not for me. But you can put down the phone after a while and say, okay, I'm taking a break from all devices.
Yeah, I like that. And I love this discussion because I think in Trinidad and Tobago, we trivialize mental health too often, where we just say, well, nah, don't worry, they're just going through something, they will get over it. When we're not realizing that these things are real issues, and as Doctor explained to us, where the mind actually affects the body and affects the physical health. And lastly, before we wrap up, would you say that things that affect the mind could affect the body in terms of medical issues developing within the body because of experiences that you would have had in the mind?
Yes, there are quite a few medical illnesses that can be either triggered by stress or worsened as a result of intensely stressful incidents, stressful events. So, for instance, people with cardiac conditions, heart conditions, can sometimes come on worse. Their symptoms can get worse when things are particularly stressful for them. Similarly, asthma attacks can be more frequent. Stomach conditions can be worse when they're intensely stressful. Blood pressure can be elevated as a result of stress. So that our body responds. We have one body. The brain is one organ, but it's part of one body. And the brain, releases adrenaline into the blood. That's just a chemical that the brain releases. We have these things being released into the bloodstream as a result.
And hormones as well too.
That's right. These things are released into the bloodstream, and when they're released into the bloodstream, they affect multiple organs.
Yeah, I hear people talk about they getting pimples and acne.
Yeah,
as a
skin
result
conditions
of
absolutely
skin condition
breaking
because
out.
of
Yes,
stress.
yes. So we have to take care of our minds in order to take care of our bodies, and vice versa. Right? There are physical conditions that can present with mental health symptoms. So that even as mental health practitioners, when we see people with certain mental health symptoms, we always have to make sure that there's not a medical cause. Right? There are illnesses, brain tumors, brain abscesses, meningitis. There are conditions that can cause people to start to have, to become confused, to become disoriented, to speak differently from the way they used to speak. And we can't just say, well, he's going mad, he's psychotic, whatever. No. We have to be sure that there isn't a medical cause that needs to be treated.
So, ladies, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. And for those of you at home, I hope you learned that the mind and the body come as one, all-encompassing. We are one body. Mind and body physically together, come together to make up who we are as human beings. And if you want to test it out at home, you can always try if you have your favorite food. Sometimes it's happened to me with chow, with mango chow. I love mango chow. And sometimes when it comes near to me, my mouth is out of water already. So your mind already connected to your body, and you're seeing that simple effect, how strong the mind is in controlling things that happen to your body. You would see it for yourselves. So as simple as that may be, you would see that things that happen in your mind would affect your medical conditions that could happen in your body as well. So it is it is advisable that we take care of our mental health. So take your breaks, exercise, do make sure you're eating healthily as well. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure that you're in a relaxed state. As Deborah was telling us, you control your breathing as well. And then if you feel you're going through a state of depression or a state of anxiety that is too much for you to bear, or a family member, then we want you to seek some help. And we have the government agencies. We have the Ministry of Health.
Yes.
We have some
the
agencies.
Regional Health Authorities.
So where could someone go and reach to get help?
Yes, so the regional health authorities all have mental health services. Mental health is special in that we don't wait for you to come to the hospital. We want to reach you before that. So we have mental health services all over the country, in the communities. So you can speak to someone at your health center. If there isn't a mental health service at your health center, they will be able to direct you to where is the nearest one in your community. And you can receive help there. In addition to which, if you're at home and you just want to talk to somebody, as I said, there are the helplines, and they're all coordinated now under findcareTT.com. So you can reach out to a helpline, and somebody on the other end of the line would be happy to talk to you. And if they think you need something more, they would recommend, what they think you need to do. So help is easily available, so please avail yourself of it if you need it.
So ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for joining us today for another episode of TT Online Community Voices. Today we spoke about mental health issues, and we remind you all to take care of your mental health because it will affect your physical health. So make sure you're breathing deeply, make sure you're eating your right stuff, you're getting enough sleep. It's so important. You're getting that exercise and you're taking breaks from your work to spend some time with your family, your pets, your plants, whatever it may be, to get that mental health break, to take care of your mental health. My name is Rome, and thank you all very much for joining us once again.